Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing really well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I'm so glad you've joined me for part 3 of our story tonight. And if you haven't heard part 1 and 2, then click on the description because you don't want to miss out. So let's continue with part 3 of our story. Mrs. Wingborn, is there any possibility that George could have taken little Petra? You've said yourself he's got a key to the penthouse. Or maybe Rose turned up and took her for a stroll in the pram. It's not Rose. No, she's away at the moment. Oh, my dear Greta, you may be right. George might have taken little Petra. I'll kill him, she growled. I will bloody kill that man. He has no right. It's him. I know it is. He's stolen the baby. Calm down, Mrs. Wingborn. If George has taken little Petra, well, Petra is his child as well. It's important for you not to overreact. Let's give him a call, shall we? Give me your cell phone. I'll make the call for you. Mrs. Wingborn awkwardly rifled in her black and white striped purse, handing me her cell phone. Her fingers were shaking so much. I doubted she'd be able to click onto the right number, even if she tried. She wasn't in a position to do anything. She was such a gibbering wreck, like someone who's had a dreadful shock, which is exactly what she had had. I scrolled through her contact numbers and pressed George's number and put the call on speakerphone so that Mrs. Wingborn could listen in. "Hello," came the distinguished baritone voice of Mr. Wingborn. "Hello, Mr. Wingborn. This is Greta speaking. Greta Patchouli. I do hope you're doing well. I worked for you at your penthouse on the Upper West Side. Do you remember? Before you and Mrs. Wingborn parted your ways." "Oh, hello, Greta. Now, this is a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to hear from you. I do understand that Anna let you go. I'm very sorry about that. You're one of the best babysitters we've ever had. And you kept the apartment of ours spotless. If you want a reference, I will be very happy to give you one. If that is what this is about, it would be my pleasure." "No, Mr. Wingborn, I'm not phoning you for a reference, but if you're offering, I would appreciate one. No, it's your wife. She's here with me at my apartment in the Bronx. It would seem she's worried because little Petra has gone missing. She was under the impression I had taken her. She's worried about the whereabouts of little Petra. You haven't seen her, have you?"
"Why on earth would Anna think you've taken our baby? Honestly, she can have some weird ideas in her head at times. No, Petra is not missing. I left a note for Anna on the kitchen refrigerator, telling her I've taken Petra out for the day. When I got to the penthouse, Petra was all on her own. She needed her nappy changing, and I made a bottle for her. Petra was quite hungry. I waited for Anna, but she was out for a very long time. So I left her a note and took Petra myself with some nappies and formula. I couldn't leave our baby unattended, as you can fully appreciate. That would make me a very irresponsible parent. I cannot think why Anna left poor little Petra all on her own. When I entered the penthouse, little Petra was howling. She was very distressed. She needed her mother." "How dare you, George!" Mrs. Wingborn cried out. "How dare you! I thought Greta had stolen my baby, and all this time it was you who snatched little Petra out of her little bassinet. Do you have any idea how worried I've been? I've been going out of my mind here, and you are acting so indifferently, as if it's no big deal. How could you do this to me, George? How could you do this?" "Correction, Anna. Petra is not your baby. She is our baby. You would do well to remember that. I left you a note, Anna, in the kitchen on the refrigerator, to tell you I had Petra with me. If you'd troubled yourself to look a little better, you would have observed the note. It was very clear to see. I'm sorry, but I have as much right to see Petra as you do. She's my daughter as well. Do you want me to go to court and report that you left our baby unattended on her own in the penthouse, while you waltzed off probably to get your toenails done if I know you?" If you want things to get messy, Anna, I'll make sure they do get messy for you. And I'll make your life a living hell, if needs must. I will do what I need to do to get custody rights. You haven't allowed me to see my baby for 2 months, and that is completely unreasonable of you. My parents are devastated not to have seen their grandbaby. You cannot do this to them or to us. It's unacceptable. So I'm going to be straight with you, Anna. So this is the score. I've already consulted lawyers. Wait until they hear you left our baby unattended. I could end up getting sole custody rights. How do you want to play this, Anna? If you want to play hardball over this, I'm game for that. But you could end up losing everything. And I'm sure you're sensible enough not to risk playing Russian roulette with our child. Do you want to be reasonable with me and share custody of our daughter? Do you want to risk losing Petra to me so that I have full-time custody of her? I'm prepared to be reasonable, provided you agree to allow me to spend time with my little girl. That is all I'm asking.
I don't like your insinuations, George. They're not very kind, nor are they tactful. You're making out I'm a terrible mother, and am unreliable, and cannot be trusted to look after my little girl. I'll have you know I'm a very good mother, and I only went out of the penthouse for a minute, that was all, said Mrs. Wingborn, with a contemptuous snort. You're implying that I'm a dreadful mother, and I can't have that. I cannot accept that.
You may have meant to go out for a minute, Anna, but you probably got distracted. You were gone for considerably longer than that, and you know that. I know that. I had time to make her a bottle of milk, change her nappy, read her a story. I've taken footage of the apartment and how I found her all on her own in her cot, and I will use it in court if I need it.
Mrs. Wingborn let out a resigned sigh. All right, George, I get the message, I really do. If you're happy, you win. We'll share custody rights of little Petra, but I would like my baby back as soon as possible, or I will not hesitate to call the police. Do you understand? You need to return her now.
I'm glad, Anna, you are finally seeing sense, said Mr. Wingborn. It's in the best interests for our child to see both of her parents.
You heard me, George. I want little Petra back very soon at my penthouse, or there will be trouble to pay.
I understand, loud and clear, Anna. I'll be dropping her off in any second.
I should think so. How dare you take her like that, without even consulting me? Have you ever heard of a phone before? I had my cell phone available. Why didn't you phone me, instead of leaving a note on the fridge? How can you do that?
Look, let's not go there, Anna. We need to be grown up about this, and not be at each other's throats all the time. It's not good for little Petra. She can't see us behaving like this. Now I will drop little Petra off at the penthouse. You'll be seeing her shortly.
There we are, Mrs. Wingborn, I said once the phone call had been disconnected. Didn't I tell you all would be all right? At least you know Petra is fine and she's with her father. Your husband adores that little girl, and it's good, isn't it, having someone else taking responsibility for her from time to time. Being a single parent is hard work. It's nice to be able to share out the load. Mrs. Wingborn ignored my words. I knew I should have changed those bloody locks. I don't know why I didn't do something sooner. You and my ex-husband both have keys to the penthouse. You never gave your keys back to me, did you, Greta? It was hardly a wonder I thought you'd taken Petra. I mean, what was I supposed to think? Mrs. Wingborn, I love little Petra very much. I assure you of that. But I would never abduct your baby. That would be an insane thing for me to do. And the last thing I would want is to go to prison for child abduction. You're a good girl, Greta. I should have never fired you like I did. Perhaps I did overreact a little. What was I thinking? I was just so upset that my little girl called you Mummy. I mean, how could she betray me like that? It really broke my heart. Do you have any idea how hurtful it is to hear your own baby girl call somebody else Mummy? One of my girlfriends was very distressed when her baby's first words were Dada, but I assured her Dada is a lot easier to say than Mama. But a baby calling her babysitter Mummy, well, that's the worst thing. I know it's upsetting, Mrs. Wingborn, but I assure you I never encouraged little Petra to call me Mummy. I honestly don't know why that happened. Mrs. Wingborn sighed. You know what, Greta? I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm going to offer you your job back on a trial basis only. Do you understand? If you upset me any more, I will have to ask you to leave. I would appreciate it if you could teach my little girl not to call you Mummy. It's highly inappropriate. Goodness gracious, if any of my girlfriends saw that happening, they would think I was an atrocious mother, and that my baby preferred the nanny over me. We can't have that, can we? Absolutely not, Mrs. Wingborn. I'll do my very best to teach little Petra what's what. And yes, I would love my job back. Thank you very much. Good, I'm glad to hear it. At least you know what side your bread is buttered, Greta. She paused for a moment and said, I just need to inform you, Greta. We are going to spend a couple of weeks at the Oregon coast. And when I say we, I mean my best friend Beatrice, little Petra, and you, of course. I will pay you handsomely, given I will need you on board full-time to take care of the place, to clean, to shop, to cook meals, and to look after Petra. I just feel I need a break. I'm utterly exhausted after all the shenanigans with George. Goodness gracious, that man has worn me to a frazzle. New York, well, it has a way of draining you, does it not? Beatrix suggested we went away together, and I think it's a great idea of hers. It would mean that you will have to avoid doing any of your college work. Put that on hold for a while, will you not? Your attention needs to be devoted to little Petra, of course. I will give you some time off to enjoy the private beach on the property, although it's not entirely private, if you know what I mean. How does that suit you? Sounds perfectly lovely, Mrs. Wingborn, I said, my heart leaping with delight. I wanted to cry out from the rooftops, I've got my job back! I've got my job back! I've got my job back! Instead, I kept my feelings to myself and was very polite to Mrs. Wingborn. And honestly, Greta, said Mrs. Wingborn, looking around disapprovingly at my apartment, the Jerry Springer show on television? You've got to be kidding me. Don't tell me you watch such riffraff. Look at this living room of yours. It looks like a doss house in here, with pizza boxes and Tom and Jerry tubs of ice cream everywhere. I'm glad you don't treat my penthouse like this, because you wouldn't have a job if you did. I honestly don't know what happened here, Mrs. Wingborn, I said bashfully, as I stared at my appalling mess, where cartons of Tom and Jerry ice cream lay on top of the coffee table, with a spillage of cream on the side, and there were 2 empty pizza boxes standing next to the ice cream tubs, covered in grease. Had I really eaten 3 tubs of ice cream? I was realizing what a slob I'd been. I think I was just a little down on myself, Mrs. Wingborn, after losing my job with you. I kind of eat pizza and ice cream when I'm depressed. And for the record, I never watched Jerry Springer, Mrs. Wingborn, I lied. I think the television just channel hops. Oh, I am relieved to hear you say that, Greta. I need my daughter to have positive role models in her life, as you will appreciate. 3 days later, I should have guessed that Anna Wingborn would only ever choose the most extravagant and exquisite seafront property on the Oregon coast to book her holiday, which boasted its own helipad. I shouldn't have expected less from a self-indulgent woman like her, with exacting standards. The 3-story glass and steel minimalistic square building was a prime example of modernist architecture, and its geometric angles were pleasing on the eye. By all accounts, on this stretch of the craggy, somewhat wild, untamed, rugged coastline, there was only a scattering of other grandiose homes, all enjoying the privileges of private beaches that may not have actually been private, but were as good as so, as the beaches were quite inaccessible to the public, unless you wanted to trespass across somebody else's property to get there. The beachfront property was called the Dreamcatcher House. It was avant-garde with cutting-edge 21st century designs, where seamless walls of glass on 2 levels overlooked the most exquisite oceanfront views. You could stare out at the aquamarine water where the stiff, rigid and unyielding sculptural rocks offered their voluptuous artistic arrangements to frolic among the ocean's spray, while the blue sky would perform evening theatrical productions by casting the most fabulously prepossessing golden sunsets over its whole expanse. Clearly, it was maximizing these glorious views. That's what the architect had in mind when designing this high-tech creation. The house boasted swanky furniture that had been tastefully arranged and fastidiously coordinated to look relaxed, elegant and cosy, to give that lived-in appearance. The bright works of contemporary art complemented the luxurious large couches, bedecked in sumptuous cushions. The rooms were all fashionable, airy and spacious, with large modern fireplaces and marble mantels. The trendy furnishings throughout possessed different textures and styles, made of glass, marble, wicker and sometimes wood. The rooms flowed into each other seamlessly, as if the walls between rooms did not exist. There was an elaborate in vogue kitchen, which opened out onto a large patio with exquisite seafront views. The O'Corrent Dreamcatcher home was comfortably nestled on top of a large mountainous outcrop. There was a modernized, innovative staircase of iron embedded into its side, which led directly down to the beach, where a ribbon of golden beach sand stretched out before you, and there were little islands of sculptural rocks, and fringing the beach sand like a verdant wall was an extensive wood grove boasting a vast congregation of mature Douglas firs, red maples and Oregon ashes. It was June and the weather was warm and pleasant, and it would seem Anna and her best friend Beatrix spent ages on the beach sunbathing together. Neither of them swam, as the current was rough and the temperature of the water ice cold, but both women went sauntering onto the beach like a couple of fashion models, sporting designer swimsuits, fancy sarongs, wide-brimmed sun hats and Gucci sunglasses, and they would take along with them an icebox full of French champagne and a good book to read on the beach. They would both return from the beach smelling of coconut oil, with skins flushed not only from the sun, but from the drink they'd enjoyed. They were clearly half-cut, as the effervescent champagne, along with the sun, had gone straight to their heads. I spent my time polishing surfaces, cooking for Anna and her friend, and watching over little Petra. I was clandestinely wondering when I'd get an opportunity to enjoy the beach, as Anna had failed to give me any time off. Still, I couldn't complain. I had my job back, didn't I? And just being here at the Oregon coast and thoroughly enjoying these seafront views was a pleasure for me to behold. But I was secretly longing to run across that beach sand and dip my feet in the icy cold sea spray. Anyway, it was way better being here than being stuck in Mrs. Wingborn's Upper West Side penthouse in Manhattan, as lovely as it was. I had taken the opportunity to walk with Petra around the quirky little town in her pram, where I visited some rather eccentric-looking shops. I'd picked up some supplies to take back to the house, a list of excessively extravagant items that Mrs. Wingborn had ordered me to get, from black truffle oil to black ink pasta, that I would be expected to cook for dinner that night. But thankfully I was a dab hand in the kitchen, and Mrs. Wingborn appreciated my cooking. Growing up, my father had been a chef, so I'd picked up a few pointers from him, and I could make some mean dishes. One morning when both women came back from the beach, they were so drunk and giggling like two little school kids, claiming someone had been spying on them while they were sunbathing and had showered them with little shells. They appeared to think it was terribly funny. I, on the other hand, thought the alcohol had gone straight to their heads, and that they had dreamed up the event. It seemed unlikely that anyone would have showered them with shells, but the two women were adamant it had actually happened. Furthermore, they claimed they'd seen the largest footprints in the sea sand that were easily 30 centimetres in size. I hasten to say I did think they were exaggerating about that. It's amazing how large things can become when you're intoxicated, and when Mrs. Wingborn was drunk, everything in her world became wonderful, including me, which did make a change. "You should have seen us, Greta. Oh, my word," said Mrs. Wingborn. "We went to the beach, didn't we? And we saw these footprints. Oh, my word, they were enormous, ginormous, massive feet, massive. Someone was trespassing on the beach. I mean, I ask you, who
has feet that size?" Beatrix nodded. "The feet were huge," she giggled. "Anyway," continued Miss Wingborn, "we were sunning ourselves, enjoying our champagne, and would you believe it? We heard someone whistling." "It was incredible," agreed Beatrice, hardly being able to articulate her words, she was so drunk. How many glasses of champagne had both the women drunk? They could barely stand on their legs, that were crumbling beneath them. But who was I to judge? I was the housemaid after all. It wasn't for me to critique the woman I worked for, nor was I to pass commentary on the behaviour of her friend. "The whistling. Oh, that was really good, wasn't it? It was really good, wasn't it, Anna?" said her friend, hiccuping. "Oh, I wish I could whistle like that," said Mrs. Wingborn. "Anyway, I have no idea why someone was out there on the beach today. I mean, it's private property, isn't it?" "I'm not sure it is a private beach, Mrs. Wingborn," I reminded her. "It seems like that because it's not accessible to the public. But my guess is if someone wanted to hang around on that beach, they could. Most of the beaches in Oregon are public, although I think there are over 150 privately owned beaches. That's what I heard anyway. I stand to be corrected, of course." "Well, they were spying on us, weren't they?" said Mrs. Wingborn, giggling. "We were on the far side of the beach, close to the wood grove. Someone was showering us with shells, weren't they, Beatrice? We heard them snorting, as if they were trying to suppress their laughter. We tried to find out who was throwing the shells at us, but there were so many trees fringing the boundaries of the beach. We couldn't see a damn thing. Hell of a shame, wasn't it, Beatrice? Someone was out there, hiding behind the trees, I suspect. They were trying to scare us. But I don't scare easily. Neither does Beatrice. Do you, Beatrice?" Beatrice nodded in agreement. "Someone was watching us. Even before they threw shells at us, they were watching us. You could feel it. I had prickles at the back of my neck. I could hear deep breathing, like those weirdos on the phone that breathe heavily down the line. Whoever was messing around, they were trying to intimidate us. I mean, honestly, they were playing games at our expense, weren't they, Anna?" Anna nodded in agreement. "It was probably a kid just having a laugh," I said. "I mean, one of the houses along the stretch of beach might actually be hosting a family of kids." "It wasn't a kid," said Beatrice insistently. "Not that kind of energy. I don't know if a kid could breathe like that. Someone was trying to scare us." "Look at you, Greta," said Mrs. Wingborn, slurring her words. "Oh, I'm so drunk, I can hardly string a straight sentence together. You've been working so hard in the house, Greta. Why don't you go down to the beach with little Petra? It's such a lovely day out there. You shouldn't spend your day cooped up in here with us. It's a waste of time. When you're by the coast, you should be out there on the beach." "Thank you very much, Mrs. Wingborn. I'd like that very much. I think I'll do that." "Well, what are you waiting for, Greta? Don't stand there. Get out there with little Petra. Have a great time." Both women were slouching on the couches in the living room, and I suspected it wouldn't be long before they fell fast asleep. Anna Wingborn's eyes were practically closing. I did not need much encouragement. Mrs. Wingborn could be very agreeable when she was drunk. It was like when she was tipsy she underwent a major character metamorphosis from grouchy and crabby to very sweet, carefree and easy-going. Hallelujah! The woman was actually being nice to me. I hurriedly grabbed a beach bag, a towel, a portable mobile playpen, especially designed for the beach, and thankfully it folded up easily and fitted into the beach bag. I hurriedly made my way out of the square-shaped glass building, running down the steel inbuilt steps of the mountainous hill to the beach below. Little Petra's legs were wrapped around my right hip, and the canvas straps of my beach bag slung over my left-hand shoulder. Petra was gurgling away happily, oscillating her tiny arms around excitedly. She might have only been a tiny tot,
but she seemed greatly appreciative of the fresh sea air, and responded happily to the pleasant feeling of the warm sun gently caressing her fair skin. It was such an exquisite day. The sky was a cup of blue, without a fluffy white cloud in sight. The temperature was idyllic, not too hot, not too cold. I think it was in the late 60s or 70s. The frisky ocean with the foaming white waves crashing thunderously against the rocks was really quite exhilarating. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the prepossessing views. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I could taste the sea salt on my tongue, and an invigorating spirited breeze punnelled me so that my T-shirt whipped against me like a large white sail. I threw my flip-flops haphazardly off my feet, and allowed the slightly warm sea sand to massage my feet. The coarse, tiny granules brushed against my skin like an exfoliating but gentle sandpaper. I ran across the long ribbon of sand to the far end of the beach, towards a large congregation of sculptural rocky outcrops, which closed in the beach like a retaining wall. Further back from the beach were the tall, lofty trees that stretched out before me like a sizable yawn. It was not the kind of wood grove easy to navigate, as you might lightly be grabbed by some indiscriminate angry roots that jutted precariously out of the ground and were eager to trip you up, or low-slung tree branches grabbing you by the shirt like a large pair of hostile arms. I threw down my canvas beach bag. It plopped to the ground with a thud, allowing the sunblock, the baby cream and the baby's bottle to spill out onto the beach. I placed little Petra gently on the sand, while I arranged my beach towel on the ground, where I was intending to sit. Finally, I set the playpen up with pegs that sank into the sand so that little Petra would be safely contained behind its little walls. Petra continued to gurgle with delight, giggling and making appreciative sounds. She was lifting the sand up in her tiny little hands, and her cherubic face was flashing me the cutest smiles. She was in heaven. I could leave her there for a few minutes while I went to explore the rock pools and dip my toes in the water. I'd keep a beady eye on Petra, but given we were all alone on the beach, I knew she was safe in her playpen. I massaged some sunblock into her face. I was sure she'd enjoy playing in the sand. Suffice to say, it would be remiss of me not to keep my eyes on her at all times. I was dying to dip my toes in the water, to explore the rock pools that lay beyond. I was fascinated by sea creatures of every kind, and was particularly intrigued by starfish and sea anemones. I ran eagerly towards the seawater, and let out a delighted whoop, rather like a child, while the seawater went rushing over my feet like a gentle ice-cold caress. The water was freezing to the touch, even though it was a lovely warm day, but I didn't mind. I glanced back briefly at little Petra over my shoulders. She seemed to be quite happy in her playpen, frolicking around in the sand to her heart's content. Now was my quintessential opportunity to examine the rock pools more closely. There were so many sculptural rocks jutting out at the edge of the beach, and I began to amble over them, examining every rock pool I could find. I found one full of so many interesting sea creatures, and a little octopus that was squirting black ink. I don't mind admitting to you, I lay on the rocks on my tummy, staring down at the pool below, utterly mesmerized, completely enchanted. Time stood still, as if the hands of the clock had been held back. I forgot all about Petra. I'm not sure how long I was on the rocks, but then I suddenly rose to my feet, ambling quickly towards the little girl. In the distance I could see two ambiguous, tall but vague silhouettes standing over Petra's playpen, peering in at her. What the hell? Were there two people about to abduct Petra? I wondered. Oh my God, please no, please no. I had foolishly failed to attend to her every need, but I'd only been gone for a few minutes surely, and this beach was not easily accessible to strangers. My heart began slamming violently against the wall of my chest as fear gripped me like a foreboding hand, and a feeling of impending dread swept over me like a hot fever. I ran with my bare feet kicking up the soft sea sand, and my breathing fast and furious, very raspy. When I got close to the playpen, I was completely out of breath. Then I saw them. But what I saw was not your average human being, which is what I was expecting to see. I wasn't sure that this was a good thing or not. What I was observing was two cinnamon-coloured female Bigfoots, and I hasten to say I was more than a little befuddled. I honestly did not know how to react. I mean, how do you react when you encounter two tall, lofty, hairy human-like beings that are easily over 9 foot tall, with overlong arms, pyramid-shaped heads, and ponderous shoulders, with human faces? I noticed one of the female Bigfoots had a baby on her shoulders, possibly of a similar age to Petra. I couldn't be sure. The little baby was gurgling away happily on its mother's shoulders, pulling her long hair, as if it was a lovely game. The other was holding little Petra in her overlong arms, and rocking her lovingly up and down. And Petra was gurgling with delight. Why was she not scared of this great big creature? When Mrs. Wingborn picked Petra up, she'd howl. But in this Bigfoot's arms, a perfect stranger to her, she seemed incredibly content. I could hear the two female Bigfoots were engaged in an intense but earnest conversation together, where they spoke to each other backwards and forwards in a strange foreign language at a very fast pace. Kila kikwa, hokila sika, omokola bisa, ashakwi, olonoto, hatilaki, hagulopoko, abosona, ikatwika, hogopika. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I suspected they were talking about little Petra. I cannot be sure about that, but their eyes were focused on her all the time. I could see by their delighted expressions they found Petra exceedingly cute, but then everybody did. I was afraid they were going to steal her away. I mean, I didn't stand a chance, did I? Fighting off two powerful creatures like this, who were built like robust army tanks. I've heard stories from the past about Bigfoots abducting children. Whether they're true or not, I don't know. But I thought they were fictitious at the time. Anyway, I'd never actually believed that Bigfoot was real. Until now, of course. Should I be worried that these two female Bigfoots were about to abduct little Petra? And if they did, how would Mrs. Wingborn react? If I returned back to the house and told her, "Sorry, Mrs. Wingborn, but two female Bigfoots abducted little Petra." Number one, that woman wouldn't believe a word of it. Number two, she'd think I belonged on a funny farm. And number three, she'd likely think I was behind the abduction of her daughter, using Bigfoot as a cunning ruse to pinch her daughter from beneath her nose. There is no telling what Mrs. Wingborn would actually think. The two Bigfoots were oblivious to my presence, but I couldn't allow them to take little Petra. I had to stop them, if that was their intention. "Excuse me," came a pathetic mouse-like voice that I realized belonged to me. The two Bigfoot females swung around to stare at me. One was still rocking little Petra in her arms. They looked at me through treacle-coloured eyes, staring at me curiously. Then the Bigfoot holding Petra spoke to me, with quite a stern note in her voice, in a language that curiously downloaded itself into my head in English. I mean, how does that happen? "Kilakwika, hakilako, anakisanakwa, hobaki." You shouldn't have left your girl unattended. Where is the watcher? Do you not have a watcher for the child? "I'm the one watching over her," I explained. The Bigfoot holding little Petra nodded. She put little Petra back in her playpen. She studied me again through her dark eyes. I know it sounds strange, but I felt as if she could look right through me, as if she knew everything about me and could read my very thoughts. It made me feel very exposed and vulnerable, almost as if I was completely naked. "Kikwasa." "I'm not judging you," she said. "Kulopikasi, hakikwana, homokolonaki. Kilasika kulusta, mikashnaka kulusta, ikikakolo, hisakwashina." "I'm not judging you," she said, "but children need to be watched. And you weren't watching her, were you? The ocean is dangerous, and Callista might have pinched her. Callista is dangerous. He cannot be trusted. He has a very bad reputation, and the rumour is he's been seen around the area, so everyone needs to watch out." "But I was only gone for a minute," I said sheepishly. "Who is Callista?" "Mushakin." "Sorry, what's a mushakon?" "It just means he's not very good. He's very bad. If he sees a baby alone on the beach, he will abduct her. You need to be very careful. I can't say that enough. Let's just say Callista is hard to pin down. Otherwise we would have all taken him out a long time ago. but he's twice our size. If he's around, you can't leave a baby unattended on a beach. There is no telling what he could do or what he is capable of. He is not right in the head, and he is very good at cloaking himself so that even his own kind cannot find him." Twice their size, I was thinking. You've got to be kidding me. Were they suggesting there was a monstrous baby-snatching Bigfoot around who could not be trusted and was twice their size? These two female Bigfoots were 9 foot tall, easily 700 pounds. How much bigger was this Culuster? The Bigfoot read my mind and answered, "Kilakwa, Hosa." "He's a giant," she told me simply. The Bigfoot looked at me through kind eyes. "We didn't mean to scare you like this. We mean you no harm. But you were gone for more than a minute, weren't you? We were exceedingly worried. We've been here for a while, watching over her for you. If Culuster is around, you would be in serious trouble." My face went as red as a field of poppies. They were probably right, although I didn't want to admit it to myself. It was easy to get distracted by these rock pools, and maybe I'd been so absorbed that I'd forgotten all about little Petra, and the time may have just slipped through my fingers like butter. I felt suddenly very ashamed of myself. "We just need to warn you about Culuster. We've sent a message to Rosalind, who will take him out as soon as he gets here. If anyone can sniff out Culuster, it's Rosalind." "Sorry, who is Rosalind?" I asked. "He is my father," said the female Bigfoot who had the baby. The baby was now studying me curiously through its brown eyes. "We've called him telepathically. He doesn't live in these parts, you see, but he's well on his way here, and when he arrives he'll deal with Culuster himself. One of our kind spotted Culuster on this very beach this morning catching crabs. Let's just say Culuster's days are now numbered. No one can defeat my father," she told me proudly. "Now that there's been a sighting of him, his days are short." "Well, I hope he gets here soon. I don't want any harm to come to Petra," I told them. The Bigfoot looked at me reassuringly. "Don't worry about that. We have a watcher over this beach. If Culuster is taken out, we'll leave a white stone on the beach. That way you will know it's safe." She pointed at little Petra. "She's missing her twin. When she gets upset, she grieves his loss. But he's always watching over her. You can tell her that." "She's not a twin," I told the Bigfoot. "She's an only child." "She is a twin," said the Bigfoot. "Her brother died in childbirth. Don't you even know that?" "No," I insisted. "You must be mistaken." The Bigfoots looked at each other incredulously, as if they couldn't believe that I had no knowledge that Petra was a twin. I had been working for Mrs. Wingborn when she was pregnant, and surely the woman would have told me she was expecting twins. But I had to concede that these two Bigfoots had extrasensory abilities. I mean, by the sounds of things, they had telepathically communicated with another Bigfoot who lived further afield, and asked him to come to their help in dealing with an unhinged, very dangerous, rather volatile Bigfoot. They didn't have modern technology at their disposal, like cell phones or email addresses, but they had an extraordinary innate ability in being able to communicate with each other over long distances, like elephants, at frequencies of less than 20 hertz, that are able to send out signals to each other over vast areas. "So is your father going to kill this Culuster?" I asked. "Kulakisa, of course," said the female Bigfoot. "Kaki kwasa, hosholokolo, amikasa. Every bad egg needs to be exterminated." "Well, now you're back with your baby. Make sure you keep your eye on her. You can't be too careful. If someone throws shells all over you, you'll know it's Culuster. Then you'll know he's around. He's always throwing shells at people. He likes to scare anyone that crosses his path. He's very intimidating. Ikakwi, hosokolo." I then remembered how Mrs. Wingborn and Beatrix had told me in their drunken state how they'd been showered with shells. Had Culuster been watching them while they lay sunning themselves on the beach? Had they been oblivious to the danger that they were in? "Don't worry," said the female Bigfoot. "Just be on your guard and all will be well." And with that the two Bigfoots ambled away and were gone, leaving me thinking, what the hell? Did that actually just happen? When I asked Mrs. Wingborn if Petra was a twin, she was astonished that I knew this. "Did George tell you this? How dare he? This was our secret. I told him not to tell anyone our business. I can't believe he told you that." I was to find out that Mrs. Wingborn had given birth to 2 twins, one dying shortly after childbirth. But as to why this happened, she never divulged the details. I'm glad to say the next morning there was a white stone on the beach, so I knew that Colusta had been dealt with, and the beach was now safe. It gave me an enormous sense of peace. I worked for Mrs. Wingborn for another couple of years, until I managed to get my degree, and my life went down a very different path. I'm glad my seedy apartment in the Bronx is all but a memory. From time to time I see Mrs. Wingborn around, but she hasn't changed at all. I thank my cotton socks that I'm no longer embroiled in her life, although I do miss little Petra, and I often think about the Bigfoots I encountered on that remote Oregon beach, and I ask myself, did that actually happen? But I can assure you it most certainly did. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.